So they frittered away this main advantage. Some of people asking are suggesting that the Russians blew their own bridge up, the Kerch Bridge over the Kerch Straits to Crimea. People say, this had to be the Russians. Well, the propaganda offensive has been so thick in this country, the United States, that Americans are inclined to believe anything about the Russians, even that they would shoot themselves in this foot with the explosions of the Nord Stream and in this foot with blowing up their only bridge to Crimea. And that is the function of 6 straight years of Russia, 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 so-called Russiagate, which started with charges that Russia had hacked the Democratic National Committee and interfered with our election in 2016. What American people don't know is that there is documentary evidence now from congressional testimony, from court statements, from emails relating to court proceedings, that this was all invented by Hillary Clinton and President Obama. There was no Russian hack. And the person charged with investigating the Russian hack has said so under oath in testimony. He said it on the 5th of December, 2017. Do the math. Do Americans know this? No. It's been suppressed since December 5, 2017 until today, 28th of October, 2022. So the media is really the problem here. First of all, Congress suppressed it, but then the media has suppressed it even longer. 2.5 years, the media has suppressed this information. What's the information? There is no technical evidence that the Russians or anyone else hacked those damaging emails from the Democratic National Committee. Why damaging? Well, they showed that Hillary Clinton pretty much stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders as the campaign proceeded, and nobody wanted that to be believed. So they said, well, no, this is Russian propaganda. It wasn't. It was given to WikiLeaks some other way. In other words, bottom line, there was no Russian hack. More important, bottom line, nobody knows that. The Russians know it. And of course, Obama threw out 35 Russian diplomats because of this non-existent hack. So again, put yourself in Putin's shoes. What's going on here? Are they willing to accuse Russia of interfering in elections just as a partisan sort of political ploy? Well, yeah, because that's what they did. Are these people trustworthy? Well, we have to put our guard up, and we have to make sure that when we deliberate, when we trust, we proverei, we just verify, okay? So it's really a tough situation now, the more so since the top leaders of both countries are not communicating, and that was a necessary element to prevent the Cuban Missile Crisis exactly 60 years ago, 60 years ago, from flying out of hand. And the reason that you and I, Nima, can be having this discussion today is because Khrushchev backed off. Why? Because there was no existential threat to Russia. Was it an existential threat to the U.S.? Yeah, they certainly thought so. We all thought so. What's the difference? Putin feels an existential threat from NATO infringement and from these medium-range ballistic missile-capable sites, okay? Is he going to back off? You don't back off from existential threats if you have the power, including nuclear weaponry, to resist. So, bottom line here, Putin's not going to back off, okay? Does he have the wherewithal to proceed even further into Ukraine? He does. Watch what happens in the next couple of months. Is Ukraine an existential threat to the United States? No way. No way, okay? So who needs to back off? I'll leave that to your viewers to decide, but it seemed pretty clear to me that I hope, well, one can only hope that Biden or whoever's running things in Washington has children and grandchildren like we do and cares a lot about what happens to them. Otherwise, we're in really, really dire straits.
I see. And we see that in mainstream media in the U.S. and which is coming from the U.S. officials. They are trying for years and years to demonizing Putin, Putinizing Russia, and you eventually end up with demonizing Russian people. We are seeing this. All Russian are sanctioned in each and every way possible.
Well, we're talking about the reaction among the American people. Let me broaden this out just a little bit. General Eisenhower, who was our president in the early 50s, he warned as he left office, and he had been a general, as you know, he warned about something he called the military-industrial complex. And he explained that since World War II, the arms makers, the arms dealers, the arms sellers, the arms people that support congressional candidates who in turn appropriate more money for arms making, arms dealing, arms selling. It's quite a nice little circle here, that they are to be feared, that the accretion of power among the military-industrial complex was inevitable unless, and this is the key, unless there were a well-informed citizenry. We don't have a well-informed citizenry. And we don't have just a MIC, an MIC anymore. We have what I've coined a new acronym. If you have a piece of paper and a pencil or at a keyboard, get this down. It's on the final exam, okay? I call it the Mickey Mat. It's easy to remember because it bears a resemblance to Mickey Mouse, okay? Mickey Mat. The military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex. Mickey Mat. Now, why do I say media as if in all capital letters? Because media is the linchpin. It doesn't work without the media. And who controls the media? The same corporations that profiteer from war. Who owns the media? Those same corporations. And so, whereas Eisenhower called for a well-informed citizenry, the media, controlled by these same forces that want to make arms and sell them and get richer and richer and richer at the expense of poor people, keeping them down, well, they're ruling the roost right now, together with people who think that Russians are a little less than equal. And you have ridiculous things like Obama's head director of national intelligence. His name was James Clapper. Now, he was an old Air Force general. He knew about the Russians. After he left office, he was interviewed and he says, you know, I know the history of the Russians. They're almost genetically driven to be deceitful, to co-opt, to do evil things. This is a known characteristic, almost genetic, in the Russian people. This is the guy in charge of all the intelligence agencies in the U.S. government. Did he really believe that? He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, as we usually say. But it's hard to believe that he really believes the Russians are genetically driven to do these things. So this is what, here I am, trying to put my shoes in my feet in Putin's shoes, right? And I say, my God, who's running this show? Who's telling Blinken and Sullivan and the others what to do? Why is this guy General Petraeus, who lost in Iraq, who lost in Afghanistan, who knows nothing about Vietnam because just a little boy, who's listening? Why do they listen to him still? Well, because there's a lot of money in the military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex. Mickey Man. Now, I'll say one more thing on this. I'm a Catholic, and I like Pope Francis. I don't share everything he believes, but sometimes he hits the nail right on the head. So here he is in 2015, I think it was. He appears before a joint committee of the U.S. Congress, the joint Congress, both of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And he gets up and he makes a pretty good speech, in the midst of which he says, quote, the main problem is the blood-drenched alms traders, period, end quote. Well, yay, the Congress people in the Senate, oh, yeah. And then they look in their pockets to see if the latest envelope from Lockheed or from Raytheon or from Boeing didn't slip out of their pockets while they were clapping. It was giving hypocrisy a bad name, for God's sake. All these people who profiteer on the profiteering on war were applauding the Pope for naming the problem, which is the blood-drenched arms traders. He had it right. Now, how can we do this? Well, it takes an informed citizenry, as Eisenhower warned. And so we're trying to chip away and say to the American people, look, you've been sold down the road so many times. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There were all kinds of lies told about not only Afghanistan, not only Iraq, but also Libya. And when are you going to grow up? When are you going to give a good example to the Europeans and say, look, we're up to here with this stuff. We want the truth. And we retired people who used to be able to tell the truth when we were in active service. We stand ready to help, and we keep producing things so that people can have a place to go to learn the truth.